So I'm so glad to welcome Philip Shepherd, a very powerful teacher, author, who helps people live an embodied life. And this year I declared that this is the year I become fully embodied. I spent all my life in my head, and obviously I went to the heart, which is a long journey, but it looks like I've never been really in my body. And I met Jeff Brown, and then through Jeff I met Philip. And those two guys are masters of embodiment. So it's such a pleasure, Philip, to welcome you.
Thank you, Stefan. As always, it's a pleasure to be here with you.
Maybe we can talk quickly about you, your background. Who are you, first of all? And I know we can talk a long time, but maybe a short version. And how did you come through your life, your work, into this concept of radical wholeness, which is your last book, and this concept of embodiment?
Yeah, for some reason, I was born with a passion for freedom, for personal freedom. And I was so aware as a teenager of the entanglements of my culture. I felt bound and trapped in a network of values and interpretations and ways of seeing and understanding. So when I was 18, I took off. I realized if I didn't leave my culture, some important part of me would die within it. So I went to England and bought a bicycle and took off for Japan. And I cycled through Europe and the Middle East and India and Japan and encountered so many other ways of understanding what it means to be human. And that enabled me to come back to my culture, because I was gone for 2 years and I was able suddenly to ask questions of assumptions that I had taken into my neurology from infancy. And it led to embodiment, because I think one of the primary messages of our culture is that the body is an afterthought. It's something you need to deal with. But what really matters is the head, and that should be in charge of your life. And you'll win if you put the head in charge. And that message, I discovered that by disentangling my culture's hold on me, I dropped more deeply into the body. And then I realized if I wanted to drop even more deeply into the body, I had to more deeply understand my culture. I think until you undo the assumptions of your culture in some way or challenge them, embodiment is impossible, because it's prohibited by those assumptions.
What does it mean, Philip, to be embodied?
To be embodied is just to bring the whole of your intelligence to bear on the present. So, we've segregated this very clever portion of our intelligence in the head and put it in charge of the show. And being embodied doesn't mean denying our ability to reason or abstract. It brings it into harmony with the body's intelligence. And just to give to help restore a little balance to this equation, science has determined that the intelligence in the head is, we're consciously aware of 1/1,000,000th of the information that our bodies are processing. So to stifle that intelligence below the neck in the belief that you'll be able to think more clearly is absurd. It's only with embodiment that you can think and feel the world, attune to the world with the whole of your being.
Someone told me, actually, I've studied the Heart Math Institute. Studies about the heart and the brain, and they said the brain has 5,000 times the capability of accessing information from the quantum field, but it cannot organize it. We need a brain to organize it. But the heart is very powerful. And then you just brought in the body. And I'm one of those people in business that was disembodied. And I went into my art, which was quite a journey. Very few people do that. And I think in business we learn to forget our body because a lot of senior people in business, it's really a path of warriorship, sacrifice. And if you listen to your body, you will stop. You will not be able to do the job, which
Wow.
leads to so much suffering for the people, but also the people around them. So, so how do you resonate with that? The heart, and I don't know what the statistics is for the body, but I tend to think the body is even more intelligent than the heart, because it protects us, it connects us with Mother Nature and all these things.
Yeah, I don't agree, if I may say so, with that assessment that we need the brain to organize the information.
Okay.
I think our disease is organizing. We feel the body needs to be organized. We need to organize nature. We need to organize the world around us. And by obsessing over that supervisory role of organizing our lives and organizing our relationships and organizing our careers, we preclude the possibility of being organized by the present. So when I allow myself that, to feel myself being organized by the present, I am brought into a place of harmony that no amount of top-down organization could ever bring my way. And that work on the heart, I mean, it's crucial, it's important, but there's a danger for me in the emphasis that our culture places on the heart, because either the heart is expressing your being or it's expressing something else. And what happens is, I mean, to me, the heart is rooted in being, and the source of being, the intelligence of being in the body, resides in the pelvic bowl. And so if the heart doesn't have that connection with the core of your being, it's subject to being organized by the head.
Yeah.
And then, the heart is tacitly told what to do and when to open and how to respond. And it becomes vulnerable and unsteady and weak, ultimately, because it's being asked to do things it's not equipped to do on its own. It's when the heart is rooted in your being, it just knows how to open. It knows how to respond. It doesn't need to be told.
Which is quite profound, this concept of being grounded, being embodied. So as it is my year of embodiment, I've been advised by some very, I think, wise friends to feel what I'm feeling, no matter, to stop questioning what I'm feeling, to actually name it. Where in your body do you feel it, and can you sit with it? I was very sad on the weekend because of a relationship challenge, and my friend says, "Okay, you have sadness. Can you go in the forest, have a divinity date with your sadness, and just love your sadness like a lover, and just welcome it? And if you can do that, then maybe wisdom will come out," which it did 2 days later. But I spent my life, avoiding all that. I'm not feeling that. So maybe you can share your thoughts or your feelings about how embodiment can actually help us heal from all of these things, because it's all coming. The sadness comes from my brain. It's from my past, obviously. The relationship challenge, I felt rejection, but rejection is not real. It's just, so all this stuff. And for me, I'm not an expert like you, but as I actually allow my body to feel, sometimes there's wisdom that comes out, and it helps me heal.
Yeah, I mean, what we tend to do in difficult times is look for a way to fix the problem.
That's what I try to do.
Yeah, and embodiment is the opposite of fixing, because to fix it is to organize it, or to get rid of it, or to get over it. And what embodiment, the genius of the body, is its ability to integrate. So there is, in our culture, we grow up with this idea that there is a place called away, and you can get over your problems and they'll go away. And there just is no such place. So either you understand that the path forward is through integration, or you further fragment yourself. And my work is all about wholeness, and wholeness is facilitated only by integration. So I don't tend to say rejection isn't real. I tend to feel it in my body and allow it to move as it needs to. And as it moves, and again, I think that's brilliant that you went into the forest to be with it, because all of nature supports integration. Nothing in nature is stuck. I think when we resist, things get stuck. And when we allow them to move, it's like, the process of integration, to me, is symbolized by that murmuration of starlings. I don't know if you know about these. YouTube has.
I watch them all the time, yeah.
Yeah, so they're brilliant. You get like up to 250,000 starlings flying in this cloud that looks like an organism that ripples and elongates and drifts and condenses. And you imagine a lone starling that isn't part of the murmuration, and then it joins the murmuration. And its movement then is harmonized by the whole, and its energy ripples through the whole and affects it in turn. So what we deal with emotional problems and the challenges life throws at us is the choice to either try to fix it and organize it and keep it at bay, or allow it to integrate. And when it integrates, it is harmonized by the whole of your being. And you think back, I do anyway, I think back on the most serious challenges in my life. And in retrospect, I see the deep harmony that was at work. That's impossible in the moment, but it's what the process of integration moves you towards, and that we contract our attention around a problem, and integration allows the field of your awareness to gently dilate until it takes in the whole of the room you're sitting in, and the whole of the city you're in, and the whole of the world, and suddenly it finds its place.
This is why I go to the forest. I've been going where I live for 20 years, in the good times, in the bad times. And I see there's never any tree that has ever rejected me. The forest always welcomes me. And I see in the imperfection, all the broken branches, the pure perfection of the nature. And I meet animals that just cross my eyes. Can we talk about this concept of resistance? It is something that has come into my consciousness. I think I've resisted many things during my life, but this concept of resistance now is very present, such as embodiment, because I think they go together quite well. Can we explore that a bit? What is it? What results when we resist, and what happens maybe if we overcome? How can we overcome resistance?
Yeah, resistance to some extent is natural, but our culture has sort of made a sort of life's work of resistance. We, as a culture, we are gathered around the idea of independence, and we feel ourselves independent of the world, and we seek to be independent. We're told to become independent, and independence is a fantasy. You can't point to one example in the cosmos of independence. Everything depends on everything else. Everything leans on everything. Everything affects everything. And more specifically, independence is the fantasy of the tyrant. So Joseph Campbell described the tyrant as the man of self-achieved independence. And you look at that phrase and you realize, my God, that's the American dream. The man of self-achieved independence. That's the billionaire with the penthouse looking down at all the little people below who can't affect him. It's the, it's the mansion on the hill with the perimeter fence and the security. That's the American dream has gathered around the tyrant's fantasy. And the impulse to resist is the impulse to maintain your independence. So there are cultures that have exactly the opposite experience of humanity. In Radical Wholeness, I write about the Anglo-Ewe culture. The anthropologists speak of the radical indeterminacy of personhood in the Anglo-Ewe culture. Radical indeterminacy of personhood. They are porous to the world and are affected by it. They're, that sense of being organized by the present. They give themselves to the present and feel it within their bodies and aren't holding on to who they know themselves to be. And so there's this choice we have. You can be present or you can be who you know yourself to be. And it's an either or choice. You can't have it both ways. So we build this construct of who we know ourselves to be, and we resist anything that contradicts our personal story of who we are. And the world is trying to mold us into something more spacious, into something more accommodating and welcoming. And we resist that molding because being who we know ourselves to be is more important than being present.
Yeah. We. It's like in the old days, they taught women that they should smoke because they'd be better, gentle ladies. So we have now been brainwashed that if we're a good meditator, we're supposed to be a better person, and we're supposed to ignore our feelings and stuff like that. And for me, it is quite enlightening for me to be told, to finally understand by wise teachers like you and others. You feel, just feel it. A friend of mine says, if you cry, cry like a man, cry for real, don't stop, just go through it and allow the wisdom to come out.
Yeah, because we bought into this idea that we have to organize our experience.
I love it.
And then we organize our emotions and we stunt them. And it's such a different thing to open yourself to the world in that way and allow yourself to feel everything you're feeling.
Yeah. Isn't it part of being human, the privilege of being human? I remember there was a movie, I think it was Nicolas Cage is an angel and he comes on earth and he gets for a small time to experience all of human life. This is what a blessing to be able to cry and be sad. You know? Isn't it part of being human to be embodied and live all that comes with it?
Absolutely. I mean, to me, self-knowledge is a gift offered to us by the world. So the more deeply we come into relationship with a blade of grass, a crow in a tree, the sound of rain, the more who we are is illuminated. And humanity is this gift of feeling the world as no other creature can, and we can choose. I mean, that's, we've got this biblical freedom of choice in a way, but to me the ultimate sin is division. And we can choose to divide ourselves from the world, or we can choose to join the world, to join the present. And I don't focus on my emotions. I experience them the way you'd stand in a river and experience its flow.
So another concept that a friend of mine taught me says, acceptance is part of our human life, but he says, even if you can't accept, can you welcome whatever's there? And that's what just resonated. If I go in the water and the water is cold, then the water is cold. If I start crying because it's cold, then I start creating suffering. And I know because I go to Maine every summer with my family and the water is cold, but we choose to go to Maine. So, and I find that acceptance might be a big step, but even welcoming that emotion, welcoming, oh, it's cloudy today. I expect it to be sunny. I find what you said before, becoming one with life, it allows us to be more in flow, isn't it? When we welcome whatever's there.
Yeah, yeah. And what makes that quality of flow possible, in my experience, is wholeness.
Yeah.
So I was building a barn in my 20s beside a river called the Coldwater River, and it lived up to its name. And I would go down to the river, and my whole body would resist it, back to resistance, right? And I went down there every single night until I could just step into the river and dive into it. And it was such a joy, that sense of being in my wholeness under the water, feeling it. And I realized that when I resist the cold, I don't feel it. And so my body can't adapt to it.
That's true.
When I stand in my wholeness, I can feel it and my body can adapt, and I don't get cold in the way that I do when I resist it. It was a really profound metaphor for me.
It is quite profound. I don't know if you know Wim Hof from the Netherlands. He teaches people to do that. But can we talk about wholeness? Well, how do you define wholeness? And how does someone that says, oh, I resonate with that concept, how do we develop this wholeness? How do we embrace it?
Wholeness has no boundary. Wholeness excludes nothing. Wholeness is also the most fundamental nature of the reality in which we live. There is nothing that happens. There's no molecular interaction that happens that doesn't ripple through the whole. Like everything is a part of everything else. And there is nothing in the cosmos that stands against that or stands apart from it. So for me, to say I'd like to achieve wholeness is to commit an error, because I can't step out of wholeness. I'm embedded in wholeness. I am in wholeness. Now, what's happened is I've been desensitized to wholeness by my culture, and that has happened systematically. So when I hold division within myself, within my body, I impair my ability to feel wholeness, and then I forget it exists. And I think our culture has desensitized each one of us to wholeness to the extent that we are blind to it. I mean, we don't know what it means to speak from the wholeness of our being, to listen from the wholeness of our being, to be present with the wholeness of our being, to feel the wholeness of the present. We struggle to feel the whole of the present. And if you're not feeling the wholeness of the present, you're not feeling the present. All it is wholeness. There's nothing that exists apart from that wholeness. So we can't achieve wholeness, but we can surrender to it. We can surrender to what is. And the part of that is feeling everything you're feeling. But to me, part of that as well is undoing the prohibitions that live within our bodies that keep us from feeling the breath in our bodies and keep us from feeling our legs. I mean, our culture has turned the legs into prosthetics. And there is so much intelligence in the legs. And there is such a deep abiding intention and awareness in the legs, and that connection to the earth that just resonates through the being and allows you to land here and now. So in my workshop, I look at these prohibitions. We've been neurologically patterned not to feel. and how to allow, how to surrender. And that's the hero's journey, because Joseph Campbell described the hero as the man of self-achieved surrender. And ultimately, that surrender is to the reality and the guidance of this present moment.
You know this already. I'm on this path, but I'm still overcoming some resistance. And I had a situation in a relationship with a friend, and I achieved sadness and all this, and who am I? And as soon as I achieved letting go, then this friend contacted me again, and it's like everything's been patched up, and I didn't have anything to do, just to feel. And it looks like we actually served each other in healing just by being who we were, and now potentially the relationship will be a different relationship, even more powerful because we both healed. So I love this concept, and I'm quite curious, and I love the fact that wholeness is always there. So why call your book Radical Wholeness? Is it because it's radical to actually feel the wholeness?
There are two reasons behind the title. One is that what I'm offering is a radical antidote to what we've learned from our culture. I have found my own freedom by disclosing and encountering and softening my way through the patterns of my culture. And it's a radical act, and others seem to be very happy to come on board with it, which pleases me. The other reason for calling it radical is that the word radical means root. It actually comes from the Latin word for root. And unless you are rooted in the body, unless you're rooted on the earth, in the present, wholeness is impossible.
I spent most of my life as a business person, very senior roles, and it's a very masculine world. And I find that most people at that level are not grounded. They're not connected to nature, which creates all this damage that we're doing. So, can we talk about wholeness? And I spent my life trying to actually committed to help leaders awake to a new way of being. Becoming more conscious. And to me, being in the heart is essential. And this year, I want to go in the body so I can actually invite them on the journey that I've been on, but I've not successfully been on it. So, what's your view on wholeness and groundedness and in healing the world? So the world can be healed and we can live in the harmony in the world and not self-destruct as a species.
Yeah, good question. I think that all of our relationships are patterned on our relationship with the body. I think that is our fundamental relationship in life. Now, we've learned to grow into a top-down relationship with the body. We've learned to stifle its intelligence and live in the head and direct it and organize it and tell it what to do. And so that template is what we foist onto our relationships with each other, with our careers, with our families, with our health, with our everything is top down. We've turned breathing into a top down phenomenon where we think, oh yeah, it's important to breathe deeply into the body. And so we push the breath from the top down. And that requires muscles, and the muscles grow tired and the breath goes shallow again. The body releases to the breath, and that release begins in the pelvic floor. And when the pelvic floor releases to the breath fills the body from the bottom up. And it's a completely different way of being. And I think what we need in our culture is a different way of being. What is destroying us is our commitment to a way of being that is top down and materialistic and blind to wholeness, which on the theme of this call is also blind to spirituality. There is a dimension to our world that we deny, that we're blind to, that we don't believe, which is a dimension that quantum physics is encountered. It's a dimension in which everything is in contact in some way with everything else at all times. There is a mindfulness to the present that holds the world. There's a mindfulness to intelligence itself, which guides all of nature. And there are, we think of intelligence on the computer model, but intelligence is something very different. Intelligence is an emergent phenomenon that arises when an organic unity is created. So there is guidance in the present at every moment. And that is a mindfulness that could lead us into harmony. But because we're blind to wholeness, all we can do is guide ourselves. We can't feel that guidance. And then we're in that top-down relationship where we're using 1/1,000,000th of our intelligence to dominate and control and organize the world around us.
You know what you just said a few minutes ago? All our relationships are patterned on our relationship with our body. This will change my life. Because I have quite a challenge with my way of being, which is quite successful for me to grow a world movement, but very challenging in my relationship where I invade other people's space quite fast because I'm very, very intense. And I can't feel other space. I can't get the signs, okay, slow down. And I'm not grounded with my body. I'm not connected to my body. So this inspiration I had this year to make it the year of my embodiment, I think it's a divine intervention that was placed into my consciousness. I think it will change my life completely. There is a challenge in our society where a lot of who we become is through our education process with our parents and the formal education system. I think we indoctrinate most kids into the societal program of being disembodied. And so how can we use this concept of wholeness, radical wholeness, to maybe educate, allow children and teenagers and young adults to become who they're meant to be, not who society wants them to be?
Yeah. What children learn is what we model for them.
Okay.
You can tell a child to be whole, and if you are in division, the child will be learning division. So our first responsibility is to find wholeness for ourselves and model that. You don't need to teach a thing. If you're speaking from your wholeness and listening from your wholeness, that's what the child will learn. And then when as an adult, you make that journey into of surrender into your wholeness, and then the way education is run becomes intolerable because you feel the wounding in children as they're made to sit at these desks and suppress the body's energy. And if you suppress the body's energy, you're suppressing the body's intelligence. But in school, if you don't suppress the body's energy, you get in trouble. And so you learn to fill the head with ideas and suppress the intelligence of the body. And to feel that from your place of wholeness is to feel the wounding and intolerable damage that it does, and then the education system will change. But it's not going to change from a top-down modality. It can only change from that place of wholeness.
So someone comes to you and says, like me, and says, Philip, I'm ready. I need to become more embodied. Wholeness, this concept resonates so much with me. What could be my first few steps? Besides going to the forest, which is great at the start, but what can other people do? I know you offer workshops, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but maybe like baby steps for people to say, okay, maybe you could consider those steps.
You need change is helped by understanding.
Okay.
So to understand that every cell in your body participates in thinking, to understand that there is no such thing as a mind-body split, because that tells us that the body is without a mind. There's the mind and no. The mind is the body. And the wound we're overcoming in that journey to wholeness is a split between our thinking and our being. And we, being is not about acquiring. Being is about attunement. You cannot attune to the present from the head. And so then to understand the body, not just as being mindful, but as a resonator that is in partnership with the present. There is no embodiment without that partnership. And what impairs that partnership is anything that compromises a sense of spaciousness within the body. And you can feel how energies are bound in the body and stuck in the body, and there are shadows in the body. So the inner work that moves us towards wholeness, for me, is the work of recognizing all those habits of breathing and feeling and organizing that constrict our sense of spaciousness. And when you return the body to its sense of spaciousness, then you feel there's room for the present to live within you, and you're on your way to wholeness. But I think unless we uproot the assumptions of our culture and ground ourselves in a new understanding, the journey to wholeness is made more difficult.
We started the conversation with your cycling trip, the 2-year cycling trip, and the word that resonated with me was freedom. And through this whole conversation, this word kept popping up in my consciousness, that as I'm embodied and I'm whole, I'm free. I'm not resisting anything. Can we talk about that a bit?
Yeah.
It has a direct link to our well-being, our health.
Absolutely. Again, our culture has a misguided notion of freedom. It's the tyrant's idea of freedom, that freedom is found within security, that the more secure I am, the more freedom I'll have. And so you build a jail for yourself that keeps you secure, or seems to, and then you can be free once you're secure. And so we devote ourselves to accumulating stuff around us that will help us feel secure. Freedom is something very different. The hero doesn't find freedom in security. The hero finds security in freedom. So to make that surrender, to give yourself over to the free fall of the present, is to come back to your security. You arrive in your wholeness, in the security of your being. And you know what? We seek safety in our culture, and we're obsessed over safety. And I've noticed that if you're alive, you're not safe. It just isn't part of the bargain. If you're alive, you're going to be wounded, you're going to be challenged, you're going to get sick, you're going to die. Life isn't safe. But there is a security that you can come home to, which is the security of your being. And to risk the freedom of surrender to what is, to your own body, to everything you're feeling, is to enable yourself to come back to the core of your being. And that is a security that no one can take from you.
I truly, truly love this. And in my head, rationally, I know that I'm just part of consciousness, and I need to surrender. But life is helping me surrender more and more and more every day, and I'm just life living itself through me, and I will die one day, but while I'm here, and I really resonate with that concept. Then, because when I'm truly detached and I'm truly surrendered, then I'm not attached. No, nobody has anything on me, because that's who I am.
Yeah.
And I have nothing to defend, nothing to prove. And I would like to ask you one last question. You're a very powerful teacher. I resonate a lot, obviously, with your teachings. But like any human, we're always on a journey. What are you trying to overcome in your life? Is there anything left for you in your surrendering process? The all?
Wholeness isn't something you arrive at.
Yeah.
You don't wake up one morning and say, oh, finally I'm whole. What's next on the agenda? Wholeness is something you surrender to with every breath. And I feel myself being cracked open and softened and moving more and more deeply into a place of trust with every day, with every week, with every month. And I have no idea where it's going to be, but as that happens, I feel a love deepening and growing within me at the same time. And part of my journey is discovering anything that gets in the way of that love and integrating it. And the journey, as you say, the journey will never end. And I'm grateful for every single bit of it.
Yeah, we're always on a path, and there's always growth. Just to conclude, Philip, you offer workshops around the world. I think. What are they called?
I do weekend workshops called Radical Wholeness, the same name as the book.
Okay, beautiful.
Yeah, and I also do 4-day workshops, and I also, honestly, one of my favorite things is the facilitators training.
Yeah.
So I get a group of 18 people over a year and work with them on everything that comes up and how to surrender to the body. Because the goal of the facilitators training is to be able to teach the work, but most people aren't in it for that. They're in it for other reasons, which I'm fine with. But the underlying premise is that you cannot teach the work if you're not in a place of wholeness.
Yeah.
So helping people surrender to their wholeness. And I don't presume to know where anyone's wholeness will take them. I don't know where my wholeness will take me, but I can feel what is inhibiting the surrender and sometimes help them through that. So I do teach the workshops, and it's really, in a sense, where the rubber hits the road, because every practice I've developed is a practice that is apropos to our culture. And there's a lot of what passes for embodiment in our culture that's about listening to the body. And the very phrase, listening to the body, is telling you that there is a wall separating you from the body. And the best you can do is put your ear to that wall to listen to what's happening on the other side. So we're stuck, even in modalities that teach embodiment, we're stuck in the head. So my work, if anything, isn't about listening to the body. It's about listening to the world through the body.
My heart just told me that I need to attend your workshop and follow your facilitators trainings.
I would love that, Stefan. I would love that.
So, thank you, Philip. It's been great. Thank you.
It's such a deep joy. Thank you so much, Stefan.